Travis, welcome. I appreciate you coming and talking to me today. And this is going to be a conversation. I want to hear, we've talked before, and I'm just sort of amazed by your journey and your spirit and passion. And so I wanted to just get a chance to sit and have a little bit more of a longer conversation. And, you know, it was interesting the last time we talked, which is probably, I don't know, a month or two ago.
Yes.
We talked about how, you were at Red Onion and Wallens Ridge at the same time I was, 10, 15 miles down the road on the bench as a judge.
Yes.
And for us to be here together today, I love it. It's amazing. It's powerful. And so that's why I wanted to get to talk to you. Can we sort of go back to, I want to talk about your journey.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can we go back to the day that you were first sentenced?
Yes.
And I always say that, as it being a judge, you're often in the same room as someone's worst day of their life. And it weighs on you often. How was that day for you?
It was a nervous day, of course, because I did not know what my future held.
How old were you?
I was 17 at the time. And I knew that I had gotten myself in a very serious situation that I really didn't understand all the ramifications. And I was just trusting my lawyer to guide me through my sentencing the best way that he could. And I remember the goal of the sentencing was to leave out of the courtroom with the least amount of time possible. I had signed a plea bargain not to receive a life sentence. And we were trying to leave with 33 years. I remember my attorney making the argument that I was young, allow me to be punished and take responsibility and go to prison and potentially learn some trades and come back out and be a productive member of society. He also highlighted the fact that I was influenced by my environment and I made some poor choices. So for those reasons, he believed I should receive the minimum sentence of 33 years. And he highlighted to the court that whatever sentence I received that day would be without parole. The prosecution had suggested a sentence of 75 years because they felt the crimes were serious enough to that sentence would be appropriate. The judge did a recess, and I remember looking back at my family during the recess time, and everybody had nervous smiles. We were all hoping for the best. And 15 minutes later, the judge came back out and he highlighted that he agreed with both attorneys that morning. My attorney, with recognizing that I was influenced by people that like to carry guns, I like to carry guns, and it was unfortunate that that's what influenced me. Then he highlighted that the prosecutor had a point, that every time that we went into an establishment, the potential for the loss of life was present. And that's what he couldn't ignore. And he started sentencing each charge. As he started to produce the sentence, my attorney was writing down each number. And I remember he got to 75. And that's why I lost the ability to add and count. And I remember just telling myself, okay, everybody gets big sentences at first, but they typically suspend so. And I remember when he got to the end of all the sentencing, I just seen a list of numbers, and the total sentence was 155 years without parole. And when he didn't suspend any time, I remember hearing my grandmother scream in a way that it felt like she was screaming over my body, like she was mourning, and I never heard that type of sound or suffering come from my family. I was shocked and overwhelmed because I didn't have a reference point. And that's what I remember most, just hearing the sounds of my family scream out and being shocked and almost numb to what I was facing. I did not know how to process it.
Yeah. You're 17 years old.
Yes, sir.
And, the court process, the courtroom is intimidating for anyone, but for a 17-year-old that really doesn't, have a lot of experience with the legal system, that had to have been terrifying in some ways. So, but you walk out of there and again, we want to talk about your journey a little bit, but I know it took a little while for you to get that real motivation, I
Yes.
think. But how do you, at the time, no hope of parole?
No hope.
Nowadays, those that are sentenced under the age of 18 have a path to parole. But at that time, there was no opportunity. How do you process that, and how do you create any hope for the future?
I did not have good processing ability at that time.
Well, you were 17.
Yes.
None of us did.
And I instantly associated my worth with my sentence.
Yeah.
I felt like my sentence spoke to my lack of worth. And I instantly felt hopeless. I thought I knew hopelessness when I was running around out in society committing crimes because I didn't believe in the future. I didn't believe that I would live a long age. But this degree of hopelessness was something different that I couldn't understand. And it didn't feel like help was coming, you know? So it was just something that instantly made me feel like I had nothing to lose.
Well, and like, frankly, many juveniles that come into the Department of Correction system, you struggled early on. That's a tough place to have to grow up,
Yes.
and, especially at that time.
Yes.
And so it took you a while, but eventually you found some motivation. Eventually you decided to make some positive change.
Yes.
Can you talk just a little bit about how you got there and when your thinking started to change?
Yes. As you said, it was a very intimidating situation because I'm still a child at that point. All I have in my mind of reference is the movies and the shows that talked about prison and the stories that I might have heard around the neighborhood. The only thing I feared was being taken advantage of because I was still small in stature, and I just wanted to be seen as somebody that you weren't going to have an easy time taking advantage of me. So I created a lot of situations trying to produce a persona that would keep me safe, you know, and after years of continuously ending up in segregation and trying to find my freedom in opposing the rules of the prison, I remember my family coming to see me in segregation at Red Onion, which is 8 hours away from Tidewater. One way.
You can't get to Red Onion by accident.
Yeah, not at all.
You got to be intending to go there.
You know, and it's a 1 hour visit behind the glass. So in my mind, it's a waste of resource to come visit anyone in that situation. So I remember the intercom going off. And at this time, I'm totally suspended in pain, suffering, and just feeling detached from life. The intercom goes off and says, "Inmate may get dressed, you have a visit." And I remember not being grateful. I remember instantly becoming angry that somebody had put their resource into coming to see me for something that I felt was a waste of time.
Yeah.
The whole time on my way to the visitation room, I had my mind made up that I was going to deter them from ever doing that again. And I didn't want the responsibility of being present. At that time. When I got into the visitation room, it was my stepmother. And this was a person that I had pushed away on every level because I did not know how to love her and not feel like I was violating my birth mother. I didn't have that understanding. So I was surprised, one, to see her. And when I came in, I remember saying, "Mom, why did you come up here? You know, this is a waste of resource. We don't even get to hug." And I remember, I would never forget this. She said, "Boy, sit down and stop disrespecting me. I don't care where you are on God's green earth. If I can come there to see you, I will. This relationship is more than what I can give to you. I get something from being in your presence." Never before in my life had I ever felt the responsibility of my relationships to my family. That was the first time I felt I had a responsibility for what was being given to me. And I was ever present that I represented pain and suffering to my family. When they had thoughts of me, they instantly got sad and weak in the world. I no longer wanted to represent that, and that's where my motivation to change came from.
That's powerful. A visit out to
Red Onion State Prison.
Wow. And a woman who wouldn't be deterred.
Who would not be deterred.
Right?
Yes.
Right. A family member that still loved,
Yes.
even when you felt like you weren't
Worthy of.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. I know that from that point on, you were motivated.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the programs, the education, the things that you did in the Department of Corrections after you finally decided, you know what, I have this long sentence, but I still have to be the best person I can be, right? Is that sort of the way you were thinking?
That's exactly the way I was thinking. I knew that my life still mattered. If it didn't matter to me, it still mattered to the people that loved me and were connected to me, and I owed them something for that connection. And the only resource I had at that time was a program through the institutional mail. It was called problem solving. And I made the intention that if I was going to change, I needed a resource to help me change. I didn't feel like I had the capabilities to produce that change. It was a frustration because I tried to change many times before that moment, but I didn't have the understanding of what it took to change. So I intended myself on doing the programs and extracting what I could use and leaving what I felt was useless. And what I found was that it started to give me clarity. It gave me focus. And I started to get excited when I would see that little manila envelope come through the institutional mail, and I would do my homework and send it back. And that's when my journey truly began.
Now, when was this? Do you remember what you were talking?
Yes, we were talking 2004.
Okay.
You know, I had been in segregation for about 2 years, still just not understanding what all this pain and suffering that I had brought to bear upon myself was about.
Yeah.
And after 5 years of segregation, I remember another transitional moment in my life. It was a counselor that would always come to the pod. And when she came into the pod, she would start at the first cell, and her intention was to see if you needed anything, to check to see if you were okay.
Yeah.
And when she would come in the pod, instantly the frustrations that the guys had, they would direct at her. And they would be cussing her out. They would be calling her all outside of her names in ways that, in my experience, these were violations of respect. You know, you say certain things with your mouth, a certain consequence would come. And so I would watch this woman go to each cell and hold the same intention that she initially came in the pod with. And I'm in the last cell. And she would make it to my cell and would have the same energy that she had at that first cell, despite all the abuse that she was receiving. And I seen that as a strength that I would love to have as a characteristic, that no matter what was coming at me, to stand firm in whatever my intention was, you know. And she engaged me. She could see what my record had said.
Yeah.
She could understand why I was back there.
Yeah.
But she looked at me and she asked me, she said, Travis, I see everything with Mr. May. I see everything that your record says. But can I ask you a question? I was like, yes. She said, but why are you back here? And that was the first time ever in my life anybody outside of my family seeing my worth instead of seeing my mess. And that triggered a reflection in me that I could not shake. And I wanted to understand why I was back there. Initially, I thought the reason why I was back there was because I had lost hope, but it was far deeper than that.
Yeah. In this conversation, the journey that you went on, your personal journey, I hope can give some hope to people. But I think the other part of that is that our team at the Virginia Department of Corrections, you know, I want them to hear, you know, something that a woman did just trying to make positive change had lasting impact.
A lasting impact on my life.
Yeah. So, what about cognitive restructuring? Your thinking? Did you have to? Because we're constantly, you know, working on programming related to decision-making process.
Yes. There's a program that I tout out in society now. People don't know what I'm talking about. Is a program that I will forever be grateful for. You know, I have already contacted the creators of the course, the National Institute of Corrections, to to speak about this program. It was Thinking for a Change.
For a change.
And from the problem solving program, I had already started to desire to be even more efficient at understanding my limitations. Thinking for a Change was the first program that I had come in contact with that allowed me to understand my influences, to understand how I could set an intention and then allow my emotions to rob me of what my intentions were, or to rob me of my intelligence. And I would just be in a reaction or just choosing to react instead of respond. And the minute that I could root down my belief system, a sense of freedom came over me that I had never experienced before in my life. And it was far greater than the freedom that I was looking for in my normal life. It was an empowerment to be able to understand myself and then to restructure myself in a way that could serve my purposes.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a challenge because it can be scary to understand who you are, you know.
Yeah.
But if you continue to walk through the process and trust it, what is standing before you is something far greater than you ever experienced before within yourself.
And some of those lessons, have you found that they've been valuable?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the greatest things that Thinking for a Change, to give a palpable example, the minute that I recognized that I had warning signs, I used to see what I now understand as a warning sign as an inevitable way that I'm going to react in this situation. As an example, I would sweat on my nose anytime, and I might be sweating on my nose now. That don't mean I'm about to snap off. But I would sweat on my nose anytime there was a fluctuation in my emotion.
Yeah.
And Thinking for a Change, I was able to become aware of that physical reaction and now use it as information to slow down and to process differently. And it allowed me to be present in any type of opposition or struggle or challenge and to remain connected to my intention. So I felt like a kid with a toy.
Yeah.
For real. And then it started to reveal more and more of my worthiness.
Yeah. And so you were seeing some real success inside for a while there, right?
Yes.
And everyone around you was able to see that as well.
It pulled me into helping to facilitate the Thinking for a Change and to do the peer recovery, Thinking for a Change.
Helping others.
Yes. Because I looked around my environment and what I seen was individuals who had a worthiness that they did not recognize themselves.
Yeah.
They also had the opportunity that I thought I would never get, which was a second chance.
Right.
And I did not understand why they weren't running and totally absorbed in what was coming, the second chance. They were more concerned about the day-to-day of the prison operation. And that used to frustrate me, and I used to judge them. And then one day I realized as I'm standing on my door judging my environment, that used to be you. A young fool running around that thought he knew everything, and people would try to impart wisdom on you, and you would reject it, feeling like you were different. And instantly I wanted to connect those individuals to the reality that you have an opportunity to live what most people in life wish they could live. I would bet that most people had a point in their life where they said, man, if I could go back with what I know now and live it again, things would be different. I would do a different thing. And that's what I realized we have the opportunity to achieve in prison, to be able to come back to a life with the wisdom of our mistakes and do it over again.
Yeah. What was your family thinking at this point?
Well, my family, they became my greatest motivators.
Yeah.
Because they would be angry or frustrated with me if I didn't call, if I didn't write. They started to become dependent upon my letters and my phone calls because it was motivation to them. And before I could recognize it, my purpose had materialized, which was to become a motivation to my family, opposed to something that was taken away from their strength out in the world. So my family was excited and motivated about the change that they seen. And that continued to motivate me.
Well, so you're doing incredibly well. You are motivating and peer recovery to those around you. You're being a positive influence on so many lives at that point. But you had no hope.
Yes.
You had no hope. Tell me about the part.
I remember my family member. I'm at a Augusta Correctional Center at this time, and I'm on the phone with my aunt, motivating her, asking her about her life. I remember her saying, "Baby, what are you going to do about your situation?" I was like, what do you mean? She was like, "What are you going to do to get out of there?" I was like, "I'm not getting out of here. I don't even have parole, and I've messed up a lot since I've been in here. And so maybe in another 20 or 25 years, and at this particular time, I had been incarcerated for 23 years. And I remember her saying, "Oh, stop. You mean to tell me you call here telling us to believe beyond our circumstances, and yet you aren't willing to do it? Don't call here again talking that mess." And I remember both of us laughing. And I said, "You know what, you're right." And I had a responsibility for what I was feeding my family. So I went back to my cell and I looked at the only opportunities that were before me was to petition the governor's office for a commuted sentence or a pardon.
Right.
Not having any hope whatsoever in that, but having a greater responsibility to the message that I was giving to my family, I petitioned the governor for a pardon. After getting the petition together, I never even thought about it again.
Yeah.
But as I continued to move through each one of my days, I started to recognize that my freedom had already possessed me. My freedom did not exist in the circumstance.
Yeah.
It was far greater than that. It was an experience. So I started to connect a positive expectation to my petition.
Yeah.
No time frame, nothing. I just knew that I'm already free. The circumstance to catch up at some point. Don't know when. And I remember coming back from work one day, doing the programs, thinking for a change. And it was a few minutes before lockdown, and I wanted to get in the microwave. I wanted to shower, but of course it was lines. And I jumped on the computer, the kiosk, and I seen I had a piece of mail. Now, I jokingly always say that I was wishing secretly that piece of mail was coming from a girlfriend saying, "I don't care that you're never getting out. I love you regardless. I'm always be here." But it was far greater than that. It was 3 sentences I'll never forget. It said, "Is your name Travis Hassan May? If so, congratulations. The governor gave you a pardon today. I'm a reporter with the Virginia Pilot. Here's my number. Call me ASAP." I remember reading those 3 sentences and almost equivalent in my shock to my sentence.
Yeah. I don't know how you process that after having no hope. Yeah, I don't know how you could.
I grabbed the guy. "Man, please, excuse me, man, do you have a few minutes? Can you read that for me?" And I remember he read it. And part of my language, he said, "Man, you lucky as hell." And instantly, I snapped out of my shock, and I wanted to call the number, the reporter, to find out what is this you speaking of. And I went to the booth. I knew it was locked down. I asked the officer, and he was like, "Man, as long as you lock down before the officers come to count on the floor." I got on the phone. I called the number. The reporter answered my call. He was all excited. Travis, how does it feel?" So I'm like, "Excuse me, how does what feel?" He said, "What? You don't know?" I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Listen, they did a press conference and they didn't tell you what. Let me just tell you what the governor said." And when he shared with me the statement of the Governor McAuliffe at that time, instantly a humility came over my spirit where I wanted to get under the ground and give thanks to God because something was taking place that I never thought would happen in my life. And the next thing I wanted to do was just call my family and free them from this burden. To tell them that your prayers, your hopes, your beliefs have manifested. And but the officers came on the floor and I had to go in the cell. And wow.
Well, there's a couple things
Yes, sir.
about that I want to unpack just a little bit. He said you were lucky,
Yes.
but you weren't lucky.
Wow.
right? I mean, you worked hard to get to that point.
Yes, sir.
That's what the point I want to make sure that we cover. And the other thing is this. At the Department of Corrections, we see people change their lives all the time. It happens. It happens. People don't necessarily understand how often it can happen. But I'll say this. We're not going to get into the behavior and the things when you first got in, but when you were at your lowest point,
yes,
I'm not sure there was anyone outside of maybe your family.
Right.
I'm not sure there's anyone that would have looked at your history and your record and things you've done and said, someday this person's going to be a candidate for a pardon. I mean, nobody would have said that. I've seen.
I wouldn't have said it.
Right. Well, yeah. And so to get, to that point, that's powerful.
Yes.
It can happen.
Yes.
People can do it. That's what I want people to understand. It can happen. It can be done.
I promise you that if the people that find themselves in that circumstance of being incarcerated because they made a decision that they now have to be responsible for,
mm-hmm.
if they would see their circumstance as an opportunity, and I know many people that may be watching this, what? An opportunity. A lot of times we define incarceration as the thing that is keeping me from my greatest potential, or my hopes, my dreams, my family. This is the thing that is keeping me from that. And we experience that circumstance through that definition. But the minute that you start to take responsibility for your life and your space, you start to look for opportunities where more responsibility can be taken. And a focus starts to come to your mind. And when you focus, a clarity comes along with that focus. And any thoughts allied fearlessly to a purpose becomes a creative force. And I knew that I was worthy and that my mistakes did not speak to my worth. And no matter what my circumstances looked like, I was going to live in that truth.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thing, even despite knowing that, feeling that, I still wouldn't have bet on me receiving a pardon, because I knew it was guys that were around me who I felt were more deserving, but that was just still me coming into the ownership of my worthiness as well.
Yeah. That's the point that I want to make sure the people hear is that no one would have thought, or very few people would have thought you were redeemable.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you were, right? I mean, that's something that as society we need to never forget. I used to tell people when I talked about being in the courtroom for the worst day of everybody's life when they're in there. And when I used to give a little lecture, and most people didn't listen to it. But I used to say, this doesn't have to define you, especially when they're young guys. This does not have to define you. But we didn't often on that side get to see this part of it. That's one of the things I like about being with the Department of Corrections. Now we get to see people really, truly buying into that worst day doesn't have to define them.
That's right.
And by their actions, they're working towards a better day. So you get the pardon.
Yes.
You go to an intensive reentry program at that point. Where'd you go? Where was that?
I went to Greensville Correctional Center.
Okay.
I remember the conditions of my pardon being that I had to successfully, complete an intensive reentry program. Mm-hmm. Now, the reentry program is mostly made up of the programs that I was helping to facilitate at the institution I was currently in. I instantly knew that I wanted to go into this blessing, this opportunity, not with a knowing.
Yeah.
I wanted to go into it renewed and come at it from a vantage point of a deeper understanding than what I thought I was imparting on others with the program. So I didn't want to go in like, I knew this, or I know this, I teach this, or I help facilitate this. I went in, legal pad, pen, front row.
Yeah.
Any impediment in me that could get in the way of this unbelievable miracle that I've been blessed with, I want to extract it. I want to become aware of it and extract it and take it out of my character. So the intensive reentry program served as another opportunity for me to find spaces of responsibility.
Right.
And I learned that I still had work to do. I still had work to do on a lot of subtle processes.
Yeah.
Because being in prison after a while, it's easy to get into a rhythm and an understanding of how things work and to not be getting in fist fights every day. I mean, that's an easy thing to accomplish. But then your responsibility becomes more subtle. It is about your inner thoughts, your beliefs, how you process things. And I knew that I still had a lot of fear and doubt because I came in as a child and I was leaving as a man, and I did not know what that looked like.
Let's fast forward a little bit then.
Yes.
Since you've been out, what have you been doing? What's the process been?
Man, when I first got out, I wanted myself and my family to not just be caught up in the excitement of me being free.
Right.
I wanted us to sit with the miracle that had taken place. I wanted us to sit with the prayers and the tears that for 25 years were prayed and cried. I wanted us to appreciate the moment that we all were a part of. And then instantly I wanted to get into a Boys and Girls Club. Because one of the things that came to me when I was in segregation and caused me my greatest pain and suffering was how in the world did I end up in this situation when I had people that cared for me? I had people that went before me.
Yeah.
I had a father incarcerated who was trying to save me from that circumstance. Why didn't I listen? And when that came to me, that my behavior overshadowed the child,
yeah,
I wanted to go to every Boys and Girls Club I could and speak to those children to let them know that no matter what your circumstance may be right now, it can never speak to your worth. Don't be tricked. And in doing that, I did not know that it was going to empower me.
Yeah.
I came back into the prisons. The department invited me back into the prisons. That was one of the greatest things that I could ever do, because when I found out I had a pardon, this desire to run all over the compound, not in celebration, but with the evidence that if you believe in yourself, and if you don't wait on the circumstance and you live from your best quality now, this is the type of stuff that can happen to you despite your worst mistake. And that's what I wanted to give back to the prisons. And so I became a part of the Department Speakers Bureau. So that afforded me the opportunity not just to come into the prisons and speak to the guys or the women and motivate them, but to also do staff trainings to bring awareness to the importance of knowing you never know the influence that you hold in your environment.
We love having you be part of it. And I appreciate conversations because we're constantly at the Department of Corrections. We have real lives in our care,
Yes.
real human beings,
Yes.
people with fathers and sons and mothers and brothers and sisters. And so just trying to figure out ways to do even better. I think the department's in a better spot than it was when you first came in. But these conversations are important for us to continue to try to remember what's important. Let me ask you about something that we talked about and our governor talked about just this week as we introduce a new reentry initiative we're doing. And it's about this sort of generational cycle. And we're getting ready to, we've already started. Inside Out Dad's the name of the program, but we're going to expand it across the state to a parenting program. You have two young children now, and so I bet this is something you're thinking about a lot is, how do you, but even bigger than that, as a society, how do we break that generational cycle?
Wow, I'm so glad. That's a beautiful and awesome question, and one that we could unpack for years.
It's true. Yes.
I am one that experienced generational incarceration because my father was incarcerated while I was still being created within my mother's womb. He went to prison and he didn't come home until I was 12 years old. So a lot of things had already started to root themselves in me when he came home. He educated himself while in prison. He came home with multiple plans and he worked them and he was very successful and he couldn't reach me. The issue of generational incarceration is a real issue. because it's something that can operate in a subtle way. And if it's not addressed, it could decimate communities and generations. And connecting to the worth of the child, no matter what the behavior of the child may be, staying connected to the worth of the child is the pathway to continue to pour your love and support into the child. When you lose the worthiness of the child or the human being that you might be trying to help, you start to disconnect from your love.
Yeah.
It's almost a hollow thing, even though you are operating out of love that is forcing this anxiety that if this person doesn't change their ways, then they might befall an outcome that's not reflective of their worth. I would say generational incarceration can be destroyed. Like you just mentioned, I have 2 children. I don't have a fear of my children becoming incarcerated now. My father had a fear of me becoming incarcerated. And so he dealt with me from that fear, which made his words not resonate with me. The people that resonated with me were the people that I felt understood me and seen me. So always highlighting the worthiness of the individual that you are trying to help is one of the major ways to stomp this condition out. Because it's a condition that exists because of a lack of connectivity to a purpose greater than just survival or suffering. So I believe what the Department of Corrections is doing now is one of the most powerfulest and beautiful things that can be done, because to deny an individual a pathway to redemption is one of the worst things you can do to the human spirit. One of the greatest things I feel you can do is to create many pathways to redeem oneself. Yeah. And I feel like that's what the department is doing right now. And that's why I run to any opportunity to assist in that.
Well, and we certainly appreciate it. And you've done great work with the system. Incarcerated individual with us, our staff. Yeah. You know, I sat in a room with you and watched as your words cause a group of judges at a judicial conference cry.
Yes.
You don't see that very often.
Yes.
But and all that's powerful. And you've had a great impact. But
thank you.
You know what? Your impact as a dad, that's it.
Yes.
That's it.
I love my children. I'm present with my children. You know, so much so that they feel like they're equal with me. Yeah. But I know the importance of being present with the ones that you love, because in society, we get distracted. We get pulled in so many different directions, and we intend to be present, but oftentimes we miss each other and sitting present with each other. And so whenever I'm tired or I feel like I've been overly busy, regardless, I sit present with my children and their frustrations and their happiness. And I have a strong faith, a reckless faith, if you will, that alone is going to be a kryptonite to any circumstance or limitation that tries to make them believe that they should invest in that more than they're worth.
Yeah. Well, you know, mothers are irreplaceable, and what mothers are doing in our society is just, it's amazing. But a dad, is a powerful influence.
A lot of the issues that we deal with as a community comes from the lack of presence of the father, whether due to incarceration, death, or mental health. And when you take the father out of a household, the structure is deformed and disconnected, because now the mother is left trying to offset the absence of the father, and that's an unnatural thing.
It's hard.
Even though it's many women that have pulled it off. Absolutely. Produce some of our greatest individuals in society.
Absolutely.
You know, so a man is not the end all be all, but to have that structure and to have other men, if that structure is not present in one home, to be present to help that mother offset that presence of a man, because there's nothing like the presence of a healthy, purpose man.
Yeah. In my own life, I wish I could have done as well raising our children as I have 2 children as well.
Right.
And as my wife did, their mother, and she's just incredible.
Right.
But I do feel, my kids have always known, no matter what, Dad's there for you. And that just knowing that, and that not even being a question,
Wow.
that's what your kids are growing up with.
Yes.
Like you said, that reckless faith.
Yes.
I love the way you put that. They're gonna have every opportunity to be successes, and it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. So we've got to wrap this up, I guess. But I did want to ask you. It's hard probably to distill this down to one thing,
Right.
but is there one thing you wish you'd known earlier that in this process of growth that maybe some people can take away?
That no mistake, failure, or circumstance could ever truly reveal my worth to me.
Yeah.
I allowed my worth to hang on my circumstances. And if I knew that I was worthy of the life that I lived, I would have made different choices because I would want to protect that worth.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of hardships to get to that worth. It took a lot of pain and suffering within myself and that I caused to get to that truth. So if it was one thing that I felt played the greatest role, it was the moment that I woke up to my worth.
Yeah. Well, what should I have asked you today? What else is there that you want to say?
Again, the one message that I would have to anyone watching this is take stock of how you are defining your circumstance. Take stock because the way that you define what you're going through will determine how you go through it. The moment that I decided to focus on something greater than the circumstance that I was living in was the moment that I had access to something far greater than my pain and my suffering. My mind became clear and focused. And as I said earlier, when you're able to take your thoughts and marry them to a purpose, I don't care what your circumstances may be, you are giving forth life. You are giving forth purpose and you are giving forth your worth. Use your circumstance now as an opportunity to help you achieve whatever your greatest heart's desire may be. And I promise you, you will be just another success story that comes out of the Department of Corrections. And you hold the key to help us deal with the issues that we're dealing with now. Work your key.
Travis, I think back to that time in Wise County, Virginia, when we were separated by 10, 15 miles. I'm proud to be in the same room with you, proud to know you. Thank you for what you're doing. And congratulations on what you've earned in this life. Keep it up.
I appreciate that. Thank you.